From Data to Dollars, the podcast series from Prosus. Welcome to From Data to Dollars, a podcast series from Prosus about using AI in business. In this episode, we feature another talk from the recent MLOps community event, Agents in Production, that we held in November 2024, where my colleague and podcast co-host, Euro Beinat, Global Head AI, and Data Science at Prosus Group had a fireside chat with Thomas Wolf, the co-founder and chief science officer at Hugging Face. Let's jump over to the conversation now.
Hello, Tom. Good to see you. Everything good?
Yeah, everything well, thanks. Just back from Web Summit. Super happy to be here as well.
Thank you for being here. Let me just say a few things about Hugging Face anyway, just a sort of introduction. Was founded in 2016 by Clem Delang, Julien Chaumont, and Thomas Wolf, who's here today with us. Over the last several years, it has contributed significantly to democratizing AI and by making all range of models accessible to everybody. I think Hugging Face hosts around 1 million models at this moment. You might have the latest and greatest numbers, but anyway, this is probably a good estimate and sees millions of downloads annually. I think one of the Llama models alone was downloaded more than 20 million times, right, in a single month. So it's a lot of traffic. Tom specifically has the role of Chief Science Officer at Hugging Face, which is very broad, if I understand well, leading scientific research, open source projects, engaging with the community, advocating for open source, and enhancing the user experience of NLP tools. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but that should be more or less Tom, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's a specificity of Hugging Face, I would say also that a lot of people here cover very wide domain from open source to science to community. You even see them, talking about what they do openly. So it's one of the nice perks of being the Hugging Face team members.
Great. Hey, Tom, so I'm going to fire off a number of questions and then we go to the audience. But let me start first with something which is about Hugging Face, let's say, the evolution of Hugging Face. So at some point, you have become the hub for open source globally, right? Yeah, that happened at some point. What is the single event that made you believe that was what Hugging Face was becoming?
Yeah, it's very hard to pinpoint. I would say like every community-based company, it grow really over time. So definitely, I think very early on, my co-founder Julien had really this feeling that there would be many models in the future. And at the same time, I had this idea that transfer learning, which was the pre-generative AI idea that one model could do many things. But at that time, we were always fine-tuning. We didn't yet have this foundation model. But transfer learning sounded very early on like a good idea, basically mutualizing, this kind of training compute, which is huge. And I think, we saw the community growing progressively over the year. First in NLP, then with maybe stable diffusion was also a breakthrough in image in terms of visibility. More recently, we see speech interface catching up, right? We've started at OpenAI and then a couple of open source projects as well. And in the future, we are moving to robotics. I'm very big on robotics. I think next year is going to be maybe the ChatGPT year of robotics. So I think, it's quite progressive. I was definitely not expecting in the first year where I had like the first 4-8 models that we would reach one day several million models. Like you said, we passed 1 million public models, but it's also true we have a lot of private models. So it's actually several times this number in total, which is crazy.
It is crazy and impressive, of course. And by the way, I'm coming back later on with this robotics thread, right? Because there is something that it's super interesting that might shape the way that we look in open source AI in the next, years for sure, but also shorter perhaps. But since we are here, we're talking about models and so on, can you say at this moment, which are the models, libraries, or tools that trend most in Hugging Face? And what do people do with them? Where do you see the uses?
The very nice thing about Hugging Face is everyone can actually just go to the front page, right? And you have this trending session, which lists like the trending model every week based on the last 7 days. And you can see how it changed a lot. So a couple of weeks ago, it would have been definitely the release of Flux, which was an image generation model released by a new lab, Black Forest Lab, which went crazy because of a level of photorealism that had never really been reached yet. And then we had first video model pyramid flow, the first open source video model. So we have already many closed source, but this was the first open source that reached an impressive quality. And right now we are back to NLP. I see a Qwen 2 coder, which is kind of a code generation model from Qwen. So Qwen is a team in Alibaba. They release extremely strong models. We have also another very interesting model for agents, which is the new OmniParser agent from Microsoft, which is able to basically understand the screen and output it in like a very synthetic representation that is extremely useful for agents, saying, okay, there is text here that say that, there is an image there, and that kind of summarize this image. So it's always very diverse. I think it's really great. We see all modalities basically progressing together. And we see also this mix of models, but also data set being released. And recently, I think it really started with ChatGPT, so about 2 years ago, this idea that you should also release a demo where people can try the models, and models should be very accessible. I think it's something that really OpenAI pioneered and that we expect now also from open source models. So there's a lot of spaces, which is the demo that you can release Hugging Face, that are regularly training.
Right. When it comes to agents, what's your view about how they're going to develop? So how much role will there be for agentic type of AI in Hugging Face? Are you planning to create, beyond what you have done now, frameworks for this, open source frameworks, or so how do you see this evolving?
Yeah, it's interesting. Interesting also because this term agent covers so many use cases that are very different from one and the other, right? Some of these agents are like a code completion agent, or like some of them are, very close to maybe software developer tools. Some of them are much more related to business use case, automatization of business process. And some of them are very close to robotics, robots that evolve, that move in your kitchen. It's also an agent. So I think it's really hard to think about one single framework or library that would cover all of this. What is sure is there is some common points. For instance, the use of tools. Many of these agents need to interact with API, with software. For robots, they need to interact with real-world tools in the future. And so that's a common point. So I think tool use is something we've started to explore a bit. Hosting tools on Hugging Face, I think it's very useful. In the end, what I believe also is to build application today, it's very interesting to focus on your verticals and maybe focus on the set of tools that you need for your agents. So I think very general agent might come at some point. And we see, the leading companies like Anthropic, OpenAI playing with this idea of a very general agent. But you also see that it's not yet fully functional, or one does not always sometimes think for a very long time, but the answer are not fully there yet. So I think today the good way to tackle an agent project, I think, is really to understand, okay, which tool do I need, in which framework should I be, and be kind of a specific, modern generic until this day come of generic agent model.
Do you see a marketplace for tools in particular? Because that requires you some form of standardization. There are some commonality across these tools. Everybody's sort of developing tools that feed agents and so on, but everybody does it in its own way. So do you see some sort of either standardization or marketplace for all this?
Yeah, that could come. I definitely know several startups trying to tackle this project, trying to understand, okay, what are the necessary things. It's also a project that OpenAI themselves, right, try to do with their generic function coding. I don't think they really have decided to double down on this from what I've heard and what I see. So it might be a bit more complex than we thought. It might not be just very simple marketplace. There might be some things that you actually need to get right. At Hugging Face, I think we really see ourselves mostly as a very basic platform, like a very low level platform. So we would be very happy we try to encourage basically people to build ecosystem on top of this. We're always very careful also to not compete with our own ecosystem. Maybe the difference of some other AI startup, we're very happy. If we see one company that become $1 trillion company based on our platform, that would be an amazing success for us in terms of ecosystem creation.
Yeah, that's for sure the case. By the way, going back to the complexity of making agents work well, I think that's we all have the same experience. From 0 to 80% of functionality, it is, I would not say trivial, quote unquote, is doable. Everybody knows how to do it, but it needs to go to 99, else it doesn't matter, right? And that every single percent going there, it becomes a harder and harder game, and it takes time. Even some basic agents like SQL agent or data agents and so on might take, let's say, 2 us a year to get it right. So I can see that very, very well. Hey, I've got one controversial question for you, right? So it came up yesterday. So yesterday we had an event with a few hundred, actually 800 of our data scientists across the group, and we made predictions for AI next year. One of these predictions is about open source, but it is a strange one in the sense that it captures some sort of contrast between those that believe that open source is going to go up and remain prevalent and the others. But it goes like this. It says that within 1 year, right, if we look at all the most capable LLMs out there, right, so the ones that actually do many tasks, like the GPT-4s, the Claudes, and so on. If you look at all the leaderboards at this moment, you find open source there. So on average, we say they're looking at all the leaderboards, about 3, let's say Llama and other models, are open source models in the top 10. So here the prediction is not going to be one in 1 year. So next year, there's not going to be any generic model like this open source in the top 10. And then the reason why people say that is that the next runs of these models are so expensive, then it will become difficult to justify commercially. Others, on the other hand, say, but it doesn't really matter. Who cares if you're not in the top 10, if it's really good at coding, if it's really good at some other task, and it's open source, right? So first of all, if you look at this prediction, what do you say? Is it nonsense or does it make sense? But you can also question the premise of the prediction.
It's a nice prediction in that it is very, it takes a strong stance. So I like this. It's also surprising because it means people assume there are going to be like 10 companies being able to train, $1 billion model next year. So I would be happy to see this race actually increase so much. But yeah, I would say obviously there will always be a difference between closed source model and open source. Just also because just when you think about it, there is this very strange imbalance, which is open source model are open, so closed source company can actually get all the knowledge from them, but the reverse doesn't work. So there will always be this distance between one is kind of playing an open game while the other don't. But I think what we've seen this year, and that was surprising, was really this catch up on most of the benchmarks. So you may think some benchmarks are saturated, and that's probably true. But it also means that what will be the leaderboard of next year is a big question, right? If it's a leaderboard of like fundamental math, or like can this model solve the Riemann conjecture? Yeah, I would expect closed source model to be on top. But the next question is, does this leaderboard really matter for any business or agent use case, right? So my view of AI is that we're going to enter a period, like a moment where it stopped being only concentrated in this very large LLM and start to be, a lot more horizontal with many applications. And we started to see that even at large company, with most of them proposing several sides of the model that have several costs and several performance, and you can even go lower. So for instance, last week we released a series of models called Small LM. These are models that are 1.7 billion and lower. And the very nice thing is, first, they have much better performance than we would expect. That's actually these small models have now the equivalent performance to 10 times larger model of last year. So Llama 2, 10 billion is actually as good as a small LM 1 billion. So that's pretty impressive. And you can run them on the edge. So there is definitely a future where most of these models will run just directly here. And I think you had another prediction on that, right? Like GPT-4 in a smartphone. And I fully agree with this. Well, will it be GPT-4, GPT 3.5? I don't know, but it's pretty sure we're going to be able to run really impressive things on this and on a laptop. And here it's also pretty sure a lot of this will actually be open source, because the race on the small local model is mostly pushed by open source companies. And it makes sense, because if you have a model that is really, your core trade secret that is extremely valuable, you don't really want to put it there, because everyone's going to be able to basically reverse engineer or at least extract the weights for sure. It's so easy to dive in this. And so this is really pushed by open source companies right now. It's Meta, it's Quen, it's Hugging Face, it's Mistral. All these companies, open source model, are fighting on this medium range that will run on smartphone and laptop. And here I would be very, very surprised if we move to fully closed source solution, first. And second, I'm pretty sure this is what will drive most of the benefits, I would say tangible business or like real life benefits where you don't always need to be, a PhD level physics or biology student to actually do very nice business algorithm or workflow. So yeah, I think we'll see this diversification, and just like the internet, it's going to be a little bit everywhere. AI agents, and most of them will be in the medium side.
So let me pick up some questions from the audience here. Do you think that Meta releases that model to be open weights going forward? All the models?
Yeah, I don't have, much more insight than you in the current mindset of Zuck and the Meta executive. It's pretty clear that they have this strong stance on open source. They have this strong idea that they don't want to be, trapped in the technology of another company. I also see from my interaction with them that they are very excited and happy about this kind of community ecosystem that's building around it. That's something they did in many other fields, right? React, they have a history of creating very large ecosystem. So yeah, I would be surprised, but yeah, obviously it's hard to predict, right? Last year, everything seems like closed, and this year everything seemed rather open in my view. So who knows where we're going to go?
There's a hotly contested question of whether the scaling laws are still valid, right? So some people believe that, we run out of data and the amount of improvement you can get for the same amount of money is sort of decreasing. So there's no way that you're going to have the same jump between GPT-3, GPT-4, or Claude 2 and Claude 1 and so on. So there is some form of, it seems some people claim we are at the point in which is getting close to plateau. Others believe this makes no sense, right? There's plenty of runway in any way going forward. And others like me that have a very strong view that even if we stop doing anything now, we still have 15 years of applications that we haven't really explored. So who cares at the end of the day? But anyway, back to the scaling laws. What's your view?
I think I'm very aligned with you. I think it's really time to build. There's a lot of really cool stuff that can already be built with a GPT-4, Llama 3.2 level. And it's mostly a matter of integrating that, just now in a nice interface. Basically, the revolution of ChatGPT was not so much around the model, but just how accessible and easy it was to use. And today, what we see as well is that this chat interface are starting to be a little bit frustrating. We're like, we don't want to chat all the time. We just want to have this much more integrated in our daily life easier. So there is definitely I don't know if we have 15 years, but we have definitely $15 trillion of startup and new project to create around that, around what we have today. But then the question is, do we run out of scaling law? And there were some notes that, maybe GPT-5 or was not the level that they wanted, some ideas. I think there is two answers to that. I would say one is that we now use data much more efficiently than we used to. And that's also one reason actually it's surprising, because we could have thought that, only very large company could train because of the data size, the compute size. But what we see is that first, there's a lot of startups that catch up with just a Series A raise, and they already train very good model. We also see that people in this very well-founded lab are not scared to leave and to create their own startup. So this make me think, maybe it's actually, I think being the leader, being the pioneer also force you to explore all these dead ends. And then the people who just follow with open source model can actually directly move in the right direction, which help a little bit. I would say right now there is two interesting directions for this from a science point of view. One is using synthetic data. And I think there was up and down. We had a lot of project on this at the beginning of the year. At Hugging Face, a nice project called Cosmopedia. I think what we discovered is twofold. One is that it's not fully the silver bullet that you would like to have. It's not yet that we are at this stage where you can just generate a lot with your GPT-4 and training on this GPT-5 is enough to keep climbing these stairs. In terms of, in particular, general coverage. But what we discovered as well is that in specific fields, if you want to work on math and code, generating synthetic data is really useful. And for business application in particular, if you are a field with kind of low resource data, which is quite often the case, using some smart synthetic data approach is very interesting to make it like a much larger data set. So I think it's a field that's really worth exploring. for fine tuning, for like adapting model, even if it's not the solution for LLM. And the second interesting thing is this trend for like test time compute, which is, instead of trying your model to get always the right answer, finding the way to give it time to think. And this will maybe help us, move from this, like everything is in this system one type of psychological thing when you should output directly the right answer, to the system two, where you find this way to think. And that's exactly agent, right? So it's still extremely interesting to explore this direction, in my opinion.
Yeah, provided we also find a way to make cost accessible for all that to work. Hey, Tom, I think we have space for another question here. And I want to go back to something that you mentioned at the beginning, and robotics, right? So I've seen an announcement recently. You post a lot about models and robots and tinkering about together and robots and so on. What is it that makes you particularly excited about this? And what do you think is going to be the next year when it comes to open source and robotics?
Oh, it's already happening. But what is very exciting, I think, is a string of breakthrough. So really research breakthrough that happened. I would say started around 1 year ago, roughly 12 months ago, let's say the end of November 2023, with some, first indication that robots could start to do tasks that we thought were almost impossible, basically with, appliance starting to cook things or starting to be able to, fold clothes, or like these very complex things where shapes are moving, are like different, are unpredictable. And basically we started to have some view that it could work from a research point of view. And much interesting was the fact that it was not only on this extremely high-end, like $300,000 Boston Robotics robot, but like something that was like $10,000, so one order of magnitude less. And what I found extremely interesting is that we could even reproduce some of these results. So it's been pioneered at Hugging Face by Rémi Cadenne, who joined us from Tesla, where we're leading a part of the Optimus, and he decided to push some open source aspect. And we not only pushed software, but we decided also to push like low-cost hardware. The question was, how cheap could we go? Because obviously, and $10,000 is still quite a high amount. But if you start to be under 1,000, and recently Rémi has pushed open source robotic arm, which is $100. So that's extremely cheap. Anyone can buy one, basically. And we start to be able to do things like folding clothes with $100 open source arm. There is a step change. I think it's even more, maybe last year was the ImageNet moment. I would say like it started to work in research setting. And next year might be what I would call the ChatGPT moment, which is anyone could basically have a robot home that would do things that were previously or totally impossible to do by machine.
Yeah. And we see in our domain, which is e-commerce, what you see in the warehouses. In the warehouses, you have two types of robotics. I mean, the legs, and we consider the legs to be solved, but the hands, hand picking thing, so on and so that's not solved. So there's a massive business around this ability of solving the hands problem. We are out of time, Tom. I could continue with dozens of other questions. I'd like to thank you very much on behalf of the team organizing it, on behalf of the community. Thanks a lot for your participation. It's always a pleasure chatting with you. Hope to have you again in another edition then.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thomas and Euro right there wrapped it up. Very interesting to hear the potential breakthroughs they talked about, and in particular, the mention of robotics, and that we may soon be marking the ChatGPT year of robotics. Let's see. That's it for this episode. Bye for now.